work we're doing is part of an overall broad effort to study the macroeconomic impacts of the pandemic. The presentation today is our first product of our short-term analysis using secondary data, where we're focusing only on the mandatory closures and holding other things constant.
In order to figure out the proportion of U.S. economy that is affected by the mandatory closures, we referred to the New York Times interactive map, which shows the states in the U.S. that implemented statewide or a partial stay-at-home orders. What we did next is to identify the economic sectors that are subject to the mandatory closures. We also considered the telework potentials in terms of the output that can be produced by telecommuting for the non-essential sectors that are covered by the mandatory closures. Altogether, these states accounts for about 97% of the total U.S. economy. In terms of the duration of the mandatory closures, we simulated two scenarios, cases. One is 3 months closures and the other 6 months closures. So in the 3 months scenario, we assumed a 3-week equivalent shutdown in China's economy. And this is in line with the actual shutdowns experienced in the country. This table presents the telework potentials for different sectors. The first column shows the feasibility of workers from different sectors to work from home, and the second column shows the actual percentage of workers actually did that. We present the direct effects of mandatory closures in terms of the percentage reduction of output by sector. This table excludes all the essential sectors for which we assume there's zero direct impacts from mandatory closures.
What we also did was impose some restrictions on trade in services which required tourism or the movement of people. What we do is we put it into a rather large model, a global general equilibrium model. We aggregate this model up into USA, China, and rest of world. We report the real GDP and the employment impacts. We're looking at the changes in real GDP in sort of a short run. So in 1 or 2 years' time, the negative consequences tend to be more for the US than they do for China and the rest of the world. We actually find that employment declines by 22%. This stems from the fact that the US economy tends to produce more non-essential items. Non-essential items tend to have more workers.
The 3-month case resulted in an estimate of a GDP loss of $4.3 trillion, or 20.3% decrease in GDP on an annual basis. The negative impact slightly more than double for the 6-month mandatory closure case, and the reason they more than double is that our model has several non-linearities in it. We point out that our results are somewhat of an upper bound because they don't factor in the countervailing fiscal or monetary policies, but those are going to have a limited effect in terms of a lot of consumer spending in any case in the short run because businesses are shut down. We also haven't factored in vaccination, which is not available, but perhaps some other immediate health care improvements that may be saving some lives, but again, don't have any effect on mandatory closure. And we haven't, while we've factored in telework, there are other kinds of resilience that we haven't included. What's most important is our future work, where we're going to focus on a phased reopening of the economy. Avoidance behavior. They may also want to avoid mass gatherings and mass transit, pent-up demand once businesses open and the stay-at-home orders are relieved, healthcare costs, and any significant effects on the labor force through many more deaths and hospitalizations due to the pandemic.